Hello, my friends. I have a question for you. Do you know that some people are born at a time when there is no ascendant? There's no ascendant. There's no rising sign, nothing. There's always the sun. The sun's always up in the sky somewhere. There's always a moon. You know, there are these three big things in astrology: your sun, your moon, and your rising. But some people do not have a rising. It does not exist. Believe it or not. And I'm going to explain this in detail. I'm going to show you charts where there's no ascendant. I'm going to explain why there's no ascendant. This is a real problem because the ascendant is very important in all systems of astrology. In Vedic astrology, it's called Lagna. Lagna sets the whole pattern for the chart. Of course, in Hellenistic, in classical or traditional, whatever you want to call it, through the Middle Ages and Renaissance, modern astrology, the ascendant is critically important. Well, what do you do if there is no ascendant? And you may be shocked by the idea that there is no ascendant at times. You may doubt it. Well, it's true, and I'm going to go into this in detail. We really need to look at this problem. We astrologers, we need to look at it because you may have clients, you may have people relocating to places in their relocational chart where there is no ascendant. You need to deal with it. And again, I'm saying it's not just a weird ascendant. It doesn't exist at all. So we need to do something about it for our consultations. Number one. Number two, wow, when astronomers find out about this, they are going to really ridicule astrologers. They try to ridicule astrologers over things that are not problems, like precession of the equinoxes, and they make a big deal about that as if astrologers didn't know about it, and they twist the history. They do all this kind of weird stuff. But this is a real problem, and someone can say to you, well, what do you do when there is no ascendant? And you might say, well, there's always an ascendant. Wrong. So it's really important for a number of reasons to get clear about this. Okay. Now, what you do know, almost all students of astrology know, is that the houses do get strange as you head up towards the Arctic Circle. You can have very large houses, very small houses, and there are solutions for that. Some people use an equal house system or whole sign houses. There's ways of dealing with that problem, but that's not enough. There's an even worse problem that there is no ascendant. So you cannot use whole sign houses because whole sign houses means whatever sign is rising, whatever degree is rising, becomes your first house. Well, there is no degree rising. Rising doesn't happen in these situations. Same problem with equal houses. Does not solve the problem because how equal houses are equal from the ascendant, and there is no ascendant. So, but you are on track. This is a problem up near the Arctic Circle. It's just that the problem is even worse than is commonly realized, in that the ascendant actually disappears. So I'm going to show an example of the disappearing ascendant. I'll explain why it occurs, and then I'll give a solution, an idea of what we can do about it, something other than whole sign houses or equal houses, which is not a solution, and I'll give you an idea of what could be going on and how we can still do astrology in these cases. You may not like my suggestion, but it is an idea that at least fits reality, what's going on in the sky. I've been working with it for a long time. I'm happy with it, but it's at least an idea to work with in these cases. What are you going to do when you get a client who, for example, visits Rovaniemi, Finland, and you want to do their relocated chart, what life is like for them in Rovaniemi while they're visiting? People are visiting Rovaniemi, Finland. It is a tourist destination, especially around Christmas. Interestingly, I'm making this video 5 days before Christmas in 2022. So very appropriate, I guess, to be talking about Rovaniemi. There's skiing. You can get the northern lights there. And Santa's there. There's this little house, Santa's house, up there in Lapland, where all the deer and whatever are, and the mountains. So it's apparently a very beautiful place to go to during Christmas. There's a university there. So, you may go to university, or if you're older and you have kids, they may go to university in Rovaniemi. I'm talking about all this to emphasize that it's a real place. It's not just theoretical. There's over 60,000 people living in Rovaniemi. And there's an airport right there, very convenient, and one reason why it's attractive for visiting. You just fly right in there. So here's why I say it's not unusual to face this problem. No matter where you're born and when you're born, doesn't matter if you were born in 1950, 60, 70, 80, 90, 2010, in the summer, in the winter, it doesn't matter where. When you relocate, you do your chart for Rovaniemi, Finland, twice a day, the ascendant disappears. And it doesn't disappear just for like a split second. It's essentially not usable for at least a few minutes twice a day. And I'll show you that this is true. The other case, of course, would be if someone's born in Rovaniemi at one of these 2 times each day, every single day during the year this happens. It's at a different time, depending, on the season and so on. But 2 times during the day, the ascendant disappears. So, of course, children can be born, or people, you might have a flight taking off or arriving then. People that live there might be starting businesses, might be getting married. That'd be an interesting electional chart. Let's elect a time when there is no ascendant. How do you interpret that? Okay. So I'm going to pick a spot in the area of Rovaniemi. And let's pick this spot up near the airport and what they call Santa Claus Village. So I've captured from Google Maps. The center of town is here, and we'll imagine that you're visiting up here right around Santa Claus Village, which is also near the airport. Airport's there, the village, right in that area. Let's pick that as our spot, about 5 miles north of the downtown area of Rovaniemi, just to be very specific about what we're talking about, because the ascendant is so crazy at this location, and anywhere along this is on the Arctic Circle, anywhere along the Arctic Circle. There are some large cities in Asia, much larger than Rovaniemi, on the Arctic Circle. So there are other places as well. Anywhere on the Arctic Circle, the ascendant disappears twice a day. Okay. So that's why I say it's not unusual. Maybe it'll be unusual for you as an astrologer. You probably don't have people visiting Rovaniemi unless you happen to be an astrologer in Finland or Norway or Sweden and people are visiting. You may encounter it. But it's an actual real situation that occurs, especially given the fact of relocational astrology. People visiting these places and wanting to see what their chart is like in that area. So what we're going to see is that twice a day, the ascendant acts in bizarre, crazy, chaotic ways, because it really doesn't exist. And also the ascendant changes rapidly if you move just 1 mile from a certain location. So let me repeat this, both in time and space. If you move forward 1 minute, the ascendant can flip over and move. The ascendant can move 10, 15 degrees a second of time. By the time you say, hello, the ascendant's moved like 20 degrees. It's spinning around. It's acting very strange. We don't know where it is, but it's moving 20 degrees in 1 second of time, to the best of our calculation. So it's just flying around in an insanely fast way that's not relevant to human life. And also, if you move 1 mile, the ascendant moves a lot. So it's not stable, and there's no way to use it. I mean, even if you had an atomic clock or something, what is the exact second that you finished signing something or that the first breath was taken? We don't measure events that down to a second. You can't define the end of the signature when you signed it, or you get the point, because you can't get it. You'd have to get it to hundredths of a second to know what the ascendant is. So that's why I say it doesn't exist. In a practical sense, it doesn't exist. And physically, we're going to look at the definition of the ascendant, it doesn't exist. So you move 1 or 2 seconds in time, you move a mile right or left, or a kilometer, whatever measurement you're familiar with, the ascendant has changed radically. So let's do an example. suppose a person moves to or visits the north side of Rovaniemi. I'm going to use a very specific location because everything changes very rapidly. 66 north, 34, 25 east, 44. And let's say the person was born on January 2nd, 1980, and in the time of Rovaniemi, 11:32 a.m. So, for example, if you were born in, say, Italy at 10:32 in the morning on January 2nd, 1980, your relocated chart will be an hour later time zone, will be 11:32. So either your relocated chart or someone's born at that time in Rovaniemi, you're going to have this bizarre behavior. And let me show it to you. We'll adjust the chart 1 minute forward. Here's the chart. Where am I? Okay, here's the chart. January 2nd, 1980, 11:32 a.m. in Rovaniemi, Finland, and I'm using this latitude of 66 north, 34, 25 east, 44, on right up there near the airport and the Santa Village place. Let's go to the time adjust, and I'm going to move 1 minute. So I have 1 minute selected, and I'm going to move forward. The ascendant is 18 Gemini 46. I'm using 0 Aries rising houses. The reason I'm doing that is because the ascendant is going to move so incredibly fast that this way you can see the ascendant move and the planets will stay where they are because we have 0 Aries. If I put Gemini on the rising, it's going to flip all over the place. It's harder to see what's going on. Let's go 1 minute forward. And there it is. See, the planets are all the same. But the ascendant has moved to 5 Capricorn 09. Let me go the minute back. 1 minute back at 11:32 a.m. There's the ascendant at 18 Gemini 46. So in 1 minute, the ascendant has moved from the middle of Gemini to early Capricorn in 1 minute of time. Let's try 5 seconds. I'm going to change this to 5 seconds. You can do this in any software. If you don't have a nice time adjust feature, you can go online and just run a chart for January 2nd, 1980, 11:32 a.m., and then try it at 11 hours, 32 minutes, 5 seconds. How far will the ascendant move in 5 seconds? Okay? From 18 Gemini 46, let's hit the button here to go 5 seconds later, and it's moved to 14 Gemini. Let me move my picture a little bit out of the way here. There, so you can see the time. Well, actually, that didn't make any difference. You can see it right on the chart wheel. Right there, 11:32:05. So the ascendant's at 14 Gemini 49. Okay, so let me do that again. I'm going to go back at 11:32. I'll just put it to a degree. 18 Gemini, 5 seconds later, 14 Gemini. So the ascendant has moved retrograde 4 degrees in 4 seconds. It's moving about 1 degree a second. Let's go another 5 seconds. We go from 14 Gemini to 6 Gemini, moving even faster retrograde. Now it's moved 8 degrees in 5 seconds, moving over 1 degree a second. Let's go another 5 seconds from 6 Gemini to 14 Taurus. It's going even faster. In 5 seconds, it's moved, what did I say, from, where did I go here? 11:32:20. Where's my ascendant? Ascendant's jumping around so crazy. I'm losing. Here it is. 14 Taurus, 13. And then 5 seconds later, it's moved. Oh, that's even faster. Let's start here. From 6 Gemini, 5 seconds later, 14 Taurus. 21 degrees in 5 seconds. Now it goes even faster from 14 Taurus to 8 Pisces. So that's 66 degrees. The ascendant has moved 66 degrees in 5 seconds, moving, therefore, about 12 degrees a second. It's like crazy. We go another 5 seconds, it's moved up to 29 Capricorn. So it's just moving incredibly fast. To summarize, on our page here, if we go from 11:32:18 to 11:32:19, 1 second of time, the ascendant moves 15 degrees. Let's do that. Let's set it to 11:32:18. I just want to make this really clear that this is actually happening. Let's go here. I want to go to 18. Let's go 8 seconds earlier. Okay, let's move up 1 second. So at 11 hours, 32 minutes, 18 seconds in the morning on January 2nd, 1980, and this happens every single day. I just picked that as a random date. You can pick today, any day you want. It won't be at 11:32. It'll be at some time during the day. You'll get this incredibly fast motion. Ascendant's at 9 Aries. I'm going to move 1 second. It's at 23 Pisces. So that's about 16 degrees in 1 second. In 2 seconds, it's moved a whole sign. It's moved 30 degrees in 2 seconds. So it's not relevant to human time. If you're doing something at this time, the ascendant's moving a whole sign in 2 seconds. If I say hello, that's 2 seconds. Vroom, we've moved a whole sign. So what is happening is that the ascendant is not conforming to human experience. And what's really a big problem with this also is that with the ascendant, which is so powerful, moving so rapidly, we would expect life to be changing rapidly. The ascendant sign is changing. It's volatile, it's wild, it's a frenzy. But at these times, life is perfectly normal. So this goes on for about a minute or two with the ascendant zooming around really fast, reaching its peak at about 1 sign in 2 seconds. But life is normal. There's no instability. There's no radical changes. The astrology is not working. Now, sometimes when you say the astrology is not working, people get upset. But that's how we improve something. Nothing works all the time. If everything worked all the time, nothing would ever get better. There's nothing wrong with something not working. That's how we improve it. So what I'm saying is that this is an area we need to improve in astrology. I'm not saying the ascendant doesn't work. Of course it works. But in this situation, it does not work. And this is the kind of thing that I love to learn, to discover, to find new things, to see how we can improve astrology. So this is a huge weak point in our astrological theory. The astrology doesn't work. It's that simple. If the ascendant is chaotic, life should get disturbing. We say Uranus is chaotic. If Uranus transits your 7th house cusp or something, does life get chaotic? Yes. The majority of time it does. It works. This does not work. Okay, so we have a problem. Let's try to solve the problem. What a lot of people do with this ascendant problem is they just ignore it. They say, oh, I'll never get a client born in Rovaniemi or visiting Rovaniemi. Well, it's getting to be a popular place. People love it. And just because you may not have clients there doesn't mean you can ignore it. The world is getting smaller. I'm communicating with some people about this on Facebook, and so many people living in these areas, born in these areas, dealing with this problem. So as the world gets smaller, we interact with more people, I don't think we're going to be able to run away from this problem. Okay, back to my PowerPoint. Okay, so just for fun, if you want to get real nerdy about this, there's times when the ascendant's moving about 1 degree in a 15th of a second. So you'd have to time things to a 15th of a second to get the ascendant accurate to a degree. It's obviously not feasible, and we don't, like I said, events aren't that crisp and sharp that you can even think of them that way. Okay, so the chaotic ascendant. So here's my point. The ascendant, even if it's accurate and we can calculate it, it's not useful because it's on a scale of time that is beyond the precision of what we can use for activity. It's not related to our human experience. Now, that's the problem with time. Let me show you the problem with the exact location. So what we're going to see here, I'm going to put up a four-wheel, a quad wheel. And what we're going to see, I'll give you a preview to what we're going to see, is that if you move about 1/5 of a mile, that's 1,000 feet, very roughly about 300 yards or 300 meters, roughly speaking, depending on whether you're thinking of meters or yards or whatever. You move about 300 yards, and what happens is the ascendant moves 5 degrees. When you move 300 meters, about 1 degree every 200 feet. Okay, about 1 minute every 3 feet. So what happens when the ascendant is chaotic and changing so fast in time, it's also changing by location. So if you were laying down sleeping and you're 6 feet tall, your head, the ascendant of where your head is about 2 minutes of arc different from your feet. So, with modern GPS, you could, in theory, measure to that precision. So this is not something that's beyond our ability to measure, but it's interesting. I just thought I would let you know about it so that you're aware of it and you can deal with it. I don't think the problem with the ascendant changing over distances is as huge a problem as over time, but you have both of these things going on. It means if you walk 200 feet, not only does the ascendant change because you've moved 200 feet, but the time it took to walk the 200 feet. So as somebody's walking around their house or outside, whatever, the ascendant is moving not only because of the change in time, but the change in location. It's both of these, and they can work together and make the ascendant move even faster because you get the combination of the effect of the change in location. Just walking across your living room, the ascendant's going to change, as well as the few seconds it took to walk. So it's acting wild. It's chaotic. So these changes, where in about 70 meters or yards of distance, the ascendant changes by 1 degree. These changes indicate huge changes happening in short distances and over short periods of time. However, circumstances, behavior, events, moods, should change extremely rapidly at these turbulent times when the ascendant is changing, but it doesn't happen. The ascendant is chaotic, wild, changing, going from an air sign to a water sign to a fire sign, but life and events are normal. So the astrology is not working. The planets are changing houses and so on quite rapidly. And then as it stretches out, it's not even quite as rapid. So you might have things changing, the sign changing every minute or every 5 minutes. You get these buildup of times where it's like a hurricane. It's like a cyclone spinning, and then it gradually subsides as you get farther away from that. So there should be these big buildups of wild, frenzied activity about every 12 hours in a place like Rovaniemi, but it doesn't happen. Also, why is the ascendant acting so strange? It's because it has essentially disappeared. And there's a moment where it's completely disappeared, and I'll explain that in a minute. And again, this happens every single day. Twice a day in Rovaniemi, the ascendant acts weird because it's disappearing. It's in the process of disappearing completely. Now, let me show you what I mean by the ascendant disappearing. I've now shown that the ascendant moves, let's put it simply, it moves extremely fast, extraordinarily fast in time and across distances. So fast that it's not really relevant to human experience. Now, why is this happening? Let me show you what's happening. On this date that we have, was it January 2nd, 1980, this is the latitude of the planets. Let me show you in the software. I'm going to change this wheel style to a wheel that has some tables, and we see that this shows the latitude. And here's a little table. telling us the moon is 3 south 52, Mercury 0 south 44, etc. Mars is north 3 north 10. And I just cut this out, copied and pasted it, and put it into my PowerPoint right there. So that's the same exact data I just showed you. There's the latitude of the planets. At 11:32 a.m. on January 2nd, 1980, at that latitude and longitude, 5 miles north of the town center in Rovaniemi. Latitude means the distance of the planet from the ecliptic plane. All the planets are within 7 degrees of the ecliptic plane. That's called you can call it the zodiac latitude or ecliptic latitude. The distance off the ecliptic plane goes up to 7 degrees, except for Pluto, which can go way, way crazy out. In this case, it's 17 degrees. But the other objects stay within 7 degrees. And the sun is always right around 0. It'll say 0 north or 0 south, 0, 0. By definition, that's where the sun is. So this is typical. This is the latitude. Now let me explain what altitude is. By explaining what altitude is, you'll understand why I say the ascendant disappeared. Okay? So just be patient and hang with me with this nerdiness, because it's going to lead to a very cool understanding, which is why I say the ascendant has disappeared. Let's understand what altitude is. In astrology, we use something called the celestial horizon. The celestial horizon is the horizon you would see if you were out on a boat and there was no land. A perfectly circular, a perfect circle with you in the middle. We call it a great circle. You're in the middle, right? No mountains, no valleys. That's called the celestial horizon. In astrology, we use this abstract thing called the celestial horizon, where the path of the sun, also known as the ecliptic plane, the sun has a path through the sky. We call it an apparent path. It's actually the Earth moving around the sun. But from our point of view, it appears that the sun is moving. Where the path of the sun crosses, or we use this word intersects, where it intersects the horizon, that's the ascendant. Okay? Now what happens twice a day on the Arctic Circle, like in Rovaniemi and even larger cities on the Arctic Circle, is that the path of the planets moves down to the horizon. So you know, for example, that if you're living near the equator, you live within, say, 30 degrees, like down in Miami, Florida, or, in Mexico, or, anywhere close to the equator, relatively close, the sun can come very high in the sky. You're probably all familiar with this. In fact, if you're far enough south, like in Thailand or the Philippines, there are times when the sun can come directly over your head. If you live up in Canada or England or most places in Europe that have high latitude, the sun never gets over your head. Never, ever comes directly over your head. We call that the zenith. Even in summer, it comes to a certain height. And in winter, the sun doesn't come as high. It stays closer to the horizon. As you get farther north, the sun will stay closer to the horizon. When you reach the Arctic Circle, the sun can go right around the horizon. Right? It'll travel right around the horizon. Does it make sense? You go further north, the sun is lower. You get far enough north and it can be right on the horizon. Well, that path of the sun, that's the zodiac, that's the ecliptic plane. It is the horizon. The sun will literally move right around the sky, hanging right on the horizon. That makes it clear to you that the ecliptic plane and the horizon plane are identical. They're identical. That's why there's no ascendant. Got it? The ascendant means where the ecliptic plane crosses, but let me say that again. It's where the ecliptic plane crosses the celestial horizon, but it doesn't cross it. They're identical. Let me get to this word altitude. Altitude means the distance of a planet above or below the celestial horizon. And at this time, at 11:32 a.m. on January 2nd, 1980, and again, can be any day of the year, twice a day this will happen, Or does it happen all year? I have to double check that. But anyway, it happens very frequently. The ascendant and I think it does happen every day, all year. Anyway, it happens very frequently. The altitude is the same as the latitude. That's because this altitude means distance from the celestial equator. Latitude means distance from the ecliptic plane, and the celestial equator and the ecliptic plane are identical. So they're all within 1 minute. Here we have 3 south 52 for the moon, 3 south 51. Or here they're within, Mars is 2 minutes different, 3 north 10, 3 north 12. If I move 25 seconds later to 11:32 and 25 seconds, now they're all within a minute. I could fiddle with the time and get it so they're all identical. In other words, at this time, between 11:32 and 11:33 a.m., the ecliptic plane and the horizon are within 1 minute at the most. At their most extreme separate, 1 minute, your finger, when you extend it out, is about a degree, 1/60th of that. I mean, they're virtually identical. And I could adjust this another 5 seconds or so on, and they will all match exactly. The ascendant disappears. And even when it doesn't completely disappear, when there's a slight difference, it's the intersection is spinning wildly around the circle. That's why the ascendant's moving so fast. So, I have here what you notice about the latitude and altitude of the planets for the birth times. The answer is they are nearly identical. And at 11:32 minutes 25 seconds, they are even closer. And we can adjust it to make them identical. So latitude is the distance from the ecliptic plane. There's different kinds of latitude. There's geographic latitude. There's zodiac latitude. Here we're talking about zodiac latitude, also known as ecliptic latitude. That's the distance from the ecliptic plane. There's altitude, the distance from the celestial equator. And the ecliptic plane and the celestial equator are identical. And all planets are near the horizon. That's why the values are the same. Now you understand why I say there is no ascendant. Because the ascendant is the intersection of the celestial equator and the ecliptic plane. And they're identical. They're sharing all points. There's not one point connecting the circles because the circles are identical. They're sharing all points. There is literally, mathematically, visually. You can think of it mathematically, you can think of it geometrically, you can think of it visually. There is no ascendant. And not only that, for several minutes around that time, the ascendant is acting from a point of view of astrologers in a bizarre way, where we can't use it. It's not useful. And here's a sky map feature, and this is all from the Sirius software, and it's showing the sky map. On the left is what the sky looks if you look up over your head, where the center is over your head, and in red is the horizon. So the horizon is around you, and the green is the ecliptic plane. This is not for the chart in Rovaniemi. Excuse me, this is for Albert Einstein. I just randomly picked a person, and this is the normal, typical thing. You'll see the green, the ecliptic plane, and that big yellow thing is the sun, which is always on the ecliptic plane, and the planets are near the ecliptic plane, and it's somewhere up in the sky. The yellow is the celestial equator. It always goes from east to west, so it always has this nice symmetrical look to it. This is what typically it looks like, but here's what it looks like at 11:32 in the morning in Rovaniemi, England, on that day, what did I say, January 2nd or whatever it was, 1980. It happens, I think, every day or nearly every day. The red around the edge is now red, yellowish, greenish, because they're identical. Around the outer edge is both the horizon plane and the ecliptic plane, and you see only one other circle, which is the celestial equator. So this is what happens. If you look at it in a sky map, what you're seeing is that they're identical. However you want to look at it, the point is simple. The path of the sun is now the horizon. It's going right around you. And because of that, there is literally no ascendant. So again, definition of the ascendant, where the ecliptic plane, which is what we call a great circle. Great circle means a circle you in the middle, intersects the celestial horizon, which is another great circle, and twice a day in Rovaniemi, these great circles are identical. At this moment, the ascendant is undefined. It does not exist. For a few minutes close to this time, the ascendant is moving so fast in time and changing so fast near this point that it is not a point that relates to human experience. I'm just summarizing some key points. And by the way, this kind of problem arises in studying all kinds of things in nature that physicists run into. And it's basically a singularity. Here's a definition of a singularity, and I give the website source for this. A singularity means a point where some property is infinite. For example, at the center of a black hole, according to classical theory, the density is infinite because finite mass is compressed to a zero volume. So the ascendant and the equator are sharing all points. It's an infinite number of points. It's a kind of a singularity where everything breaks down. It's very commonly, it happens. And when it happens, what do we expect? Something unusual, like a black hole. A black hole is this crazy thing that's beyond human understanding. I mean, we can talk about it, but we can't imagine it in reality. We would expect something like a black hole, some kind of, like if you were in Rovaniemi at this time of day, you would experience some kind of enlightenment, some kind of transcendence, something amazing would happen. And it's lasting several minutes, so it's lasting long enough to experience it. So, with black holes, they predicted that black holes would exist because the formula showed that this singularity would occur. Then they found them. It's beautiful. In astrology, we're running into this singularity, but nothing unusual happens. That tells us the singularity is not there. The reason it's not there is because the ascendant has lost its power. The only way I can make sense of this, and maybe you can come up with a better idea, is that the ascendant loses its power. It's lost its power. That's why nothing special happens. And what's really amazingly beautiful about this, there's another powerful point called the vertex. The vertex is always 0 Aries or 0 Libra on the equator. If you relocate your chart to somewhere on the equator, like Quito, Ecuador or something, I already know what your vertex will be. It'll be 0 Aries or 0 Libra. Not because I'm psychic, because it's true for everybody. The vertex makes no sense on the equator. The ascendant makes no sense near the poles. And we could guess, a reasonable idea, that the vertex is gaining strength as you head north. The equator is losing strength as you head north, and vice versa as you go to the equator. There's also a beautiful geometry behind this I talk about in other videos. So I've got a bunch of videos that talk about the vertex, and you can find those and watch those. But in those videos, I say that the ascendant disappears, and some people say, what do you mean it disappears? I don't quite get that. Well, I wanted to explain it in detail. What I mean when I say the ascendant disappears, I think you got it. And it's very simple. We all know that the sun, if you're up near the Arctic Circle, even if you haven't been there, you've heard from friends and other people, the sun is very close to the horizon all day. And there's a certain time when it's moving right on the horizon, means that the path of the sun, the ecliptic plane, is identical to the celestial equator. And the ascendant is where those two great circles intersect. It's where the ecliptic plane and the celestial equator intersect. They're not intersecting, they're identical. There is literally no ascendant, and the ascendant's acting in ways that we can't use. It's very clear. Simple solution, the ascendant has disappeared and is replaced with the power of the vertex. So just to read here on the slide, the summary, the ascendant weakens at extreme geographic latitudes and the vertex strengthens at extreme geographic latitudes. Near the equator, the opposite happens. The ascendant gains strength near the equator and the vertex weakens near the equator. And details of this ascendant and vertex strength are given in other videos. I've already explained that in detail. What I didn't explain was what I meant by the ascendant disappearing. It really disappears and it's unusable. Some people say that the ascendant flips 180 degrees. It actually doesn't flip in an instant, 180 degrees. It starts moving extremely rapidly, right? If that doesn't ring a bell, go watch this video again. I show it's not actually flipping in an instant. It's moving very rapidly. Anyway, so when astronomers find out there is no ascendant in some astrology charts, it will be embarrassing for astrologers if we, A, do not admit that there is this crisis. We have a crisis. We put a lot of emphasis on the ascendant. Sometimes the ascendant does not exist. But there is a solution, and I've offered a solution that I have confidence in. I've done a lot of research on it. We're starting to do database research on it, working with clients, talking to people, etc. as well. We have a solution. It may not be a solution you like. It introduces some new things to think about, to be aware of, to use. But to me, that's exciting. If the sciences didn't develop, we wouldn't have cell phones or anything else today. If the arts didn't develop, we would still be singing the same songs and looking at the same paintings from 3,000 years ago. I don't think we need to be afraid of change, growth, development, and new insights. I think that's my last slide. It is indeed. I'm at 41 minutes. So that's it, my friend. My friends, I hope that that helps make it clear why I say the ascendant does not exist at certain times. And this is a real problem that we need to face, and we need to come up with solutions. I've come up with a solution I'm happy with. Maybe you'll come up with some different solutions that are also satisfying. But saying that you use equal houses or whole sign houses, does that solve the problem? No, because they depend on the ascendant, and the ascendant doesn't exist. Okay, that's it, my friends. I hope that's helpful. Thank you very much. God bless. Namaste.